What you're witnessing, what you're seeing, it's not warfare. It's downright cruelty, inhumane, and it's, like I said, it's animalistic. What these animals did, they're not human. They don't deserve the title of human. Any person who does this kind of acts to another human being does not deserve the title of human. You're like a demon in my book.
All right, so Doron, now is it Keidar or Keidar?
Keidar.
Keidar. Doron Keidar, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And I know you're tired. I know you're busy. Normally here on the show, we're dealing with people in the same continent, and obviously now I'm changing it, and we're talking to someone who's over in Israel. I've talked to Eric Rafael, and he's in France. But it's there's definitely interesting when it's nice that we can talk. This is a great thing in modern technology. Under the circumstances, I wish we could talk under better times. But thank you. So I just want to get into a couple things before we get into it. It's just tell the audience your background. First of all, how did because you don't speak with an Israeli accent. How did you end up in Israel?
Okay, so I was born in Israel, in the very southern part of Israel. And you're right, I don't have the accent. And essentially my parents were Christian Zionists who my father fought in World War II, by the way. And he grew up in a Protestant home that apparently was very pro the idea that the Jewish people are God's chosen people, and that we as Christians have a mandate to defend and stand up for them. And I learned that one day when my father was telling me a story when he was like a young boy, and his father was a boxer, or what do you call a guy who spars with the heavyweights in Washington, D.C. And his that was his side job, his side gig, whereas he was a barber. So I guess his nickname in the ring was the Barber, but I'm not sure. I can't verify it, but sounds cool. And so that was my grandfather. And so when my father came home one day, all scruffed up, beat up, his dad asked him what happened. Who'd you get in a fight with? Oh, don't worry, I won, Dad. It's all good. He's all feeling proud of himself, and he probably used some of the techniques his dad showed him. And he says, yeah, but who'd you fight? And he says, oh, it's the rabbi's kid down the street. And then he stops him in his tracks and says, they are God's chosen people. You don't lift a finger on them, basically. Something along those lines. And so I have a feeling that seed that was planted in my dad's mind as a young boy led to him lying about his age. So sorry, United States Navy. The truth is, the cat's out of the bag. He's already buried and dead, so it's okay. You can't reprimand him retroactively, I guess. But he lied about his age. He was 15 years old, and a lot of his friends, from letters that had read, you could tell that he had gotten letters from friends that were already deployed. So kids he probably grew up with in the neighborhood, and they called him Jack. That was my father's name is John. So hey Jack, we're here. And they're trying to probably candy coat it like it's really great, but in reality it sucked. And they're just like, we need more guys, so I don't have to do maybe less guard duty or whatever, right? Have more manpower. And so any case, he gets all these letters, and I can imagine he's frustrated, and he hears that the Jews are being murdered, right? Eventually the American population got, the civilians got to find out much later than the US government, but they did. And so my father then lied about his age, joined the Navy. He ended up in the submarine unit and learned electrical engineering. And so that's what got me to where I'm at today, because through his electrical engineering certification, he then took that to the civilian world, opened up the first TV shop in Washington D.C. is again, this is all what I hear from stories of friends and family, and trying to piece together things. So if none of this is true, that's okay. It's like, the movie Big Fish.
Yes,
I think it's called.
yes.
So it's kind of like that. Just the facts don't really matter. It's the story that you really make it sound exciting. Again, I'm not trying to say that this is what I'm doing, but that's kind of how I feel growing up in a home where I ended up then later in foster care. And so I don't really know much about my family and past, because all of them are in the United States, and it's just me and my brother. I had a twin brother, and then my brother who's 2 years younger that grew up here by ourselves. So this is what I'm piecing together to you from, again, my past. So any case, fast forward after, post the war, my father is, growing in the electrical engineering world. He's no longer selling TV sets. He's now also working on building projects in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. And if anybody knows the Pier 66 building in Fort Lauderdale with the spiky spinning top and the cool colored lights, that was his project, for example, and a few other government buildings downtown, and so on. Fast forward years later, one of his good friends from the war says, "Hey, Jack, I know you're a crazy Zionist. You love Israel. Guess what? Bingo. Post the negotiations with Egypt, the peace negotiations, the United States brokered a peace negotiation where they sent American contractors to help build Israel, help us, because we can't build. Israelis are incompetent, right? So they helped us build bases for us here in Israel with U.S. standard and all that fun stuff. Years later, as a soldier, I get to be deployed in one of those bases. By the way, you're like, "Yep, my dad built this," and so that's what brought us to Israel. My father leaves his first wife. He leaves my older sister, his firstborn, from the first marriage. At the time, she was about 18, I believe, had just got out of high school. And he leaves all of that behind because his wife is like, "Listen, I'm staying right here, right on the canal with all the rich people. I don't need to go to that, Dust Bowl over there. And, I don't have the same aspirations." So they ended up essentially separating. My father then marries a Jewish girl from a place called Kiryat Shmona on the very northern part of Israel. And they met in Herzliya, which is in the center of Israel, while he was on business meetings. She was a soldier girl. I think she was in the Air Force or something like that. And they fell in love. She's like my sister's age, basically. And but then she wanted America. He wanted Israel. They split after they bought a house together. I know. She married a Jewish lawyer, by the way, and moved to New York, and got the Israeli dream made true. And and so and so then my father meets my mother, who is suffering from mental illness in the United States, and they fall in love. She gets better. They get married. She agrees to follow him to Israel, even though she is not a Zionist. She grew up as a Catholic. And then I'm born here in Israel with my twin brother in Eilat. And then my younger brother is born later when we move, after a few years in Eilat, we move up north to the house that my father bought with his second wife. And so we grew up in Kiryat Shmona until, and then we have a smoke fire in our home that ends up taking the life of my twin brother. And I got saved by a miracle because we were literally in the same crib. And the Moroccan family that we grew up with, that they were like second parents basically to myself and my siblings, Yaakov and Lillian Ben Aroush, so Moroccan. Yaakov comes to the house after my mom calls him because my brother, who had just been born, woken up and probably wanted, to nurse. And she sees everything's just black, right? And she's all confused. And thank God she had a phone next to her bed, calls Yaakov and Lillian and like, "Hey, we need help." By the way, Yaakov and Lillian, they still live in Kiryat Shmona. And right now, by the way, they're I'm not going to say where, but they're somewhere in Israel, away from all the rocketing that's happening in the north right now as well, not just the Gaza communities. So that's a little side note. So Yaakov saves my life, tries to save my twin's life, and ends up saving my younger brother and my mom's life. My twin brother ended up without a pulse when they pulled him out of the house. I had a pulse thanks to Lillian, she's actually a nurse in her training. She found a pulse, and when the medical team arrived, she says, "Take this guy quickly. He's still got a pulse." So they drove me from Kiryat Shmona, and we're talking about back in 1982, where the roads weren't so great. From there, they drove me all the way to Haifa to a military field hospital at the time. It wasn't even what it is today, which is one of the biggest hospitals in Israel. And that's where they end up saving my life. And then we end up with a bunch of tragedy, and that ends up kind of destroying my family. My mom goes off the deep end mentally. My father becomes an alcoholic, unfortunately, because he ends up getting hurt in one of the projects when we moved to the States for a few years, working in New York City. He gets hurt. We come back. He's in disability. He's now an old man, right? I mean, he grew up in the 20s, just to give you context. And then everything goes south. And then I end up in foster care in Haifa. So that's a very quick, hopefully that gives a little good background as to where I've come from. And anything else?
No, I mean, wow. I mean,
yeah,
that's a whole tragedy. I'm very, very taken back by all you had to say. So, all right. So just to catch you up to current standards, not standards, but current times. All right. So you're living in Israel. What's your day job? I mean, obviously right now after what happened, everyone's being called up, or a lot of people are being called up, not everybody. But what's your day job?
Yeah, so my day job is that I work executive protection for an Israeli company called BHS. BHS Security is would you say like a premium high-end security company founded by two Israeli Navy SEALs. Both are deployed, by the way, the CEO and the COO. They're both in their respective units. Like 90% of our workforce actually, because most of our guys are tier 1 operators and or special forces background, and or what we call Achid, which is the 9-week course, which is a foundational course. It's not the full deal. That gets you into into government security, or the people that do security for the prime minister and down. Okay. So that's the people that we pool to work executive protection in our company, and we keep a very high standard. Unfortunately, talking about that, Israel is known for security, and we have a reputation and all that. And so many companies take advantage of that and basically will advertise that they can perform all of those things, but in reality, they can't. And many times we end up getting the project, or at least we get, requested like, hey, could you fill in, we need manpower. We need people who are your quality and that have your licensing. That's another important thing, by the way, for anybody that wants to hire executive protection in Israel. You have to have licensing and you have to have insurances. Most of the companies in Israel, and I'm sorry to say this, it's anywhere between 80 to 90% do not have either of those two. So, they're riding the Israel security specialist wave, and and people like me don't like that, right? We are straight shooting. We have all our licensing, and like I said, the men that we have, and women, by the way, that work in our company. And that's another thing that we specialize in, is that we will get you also very good and highly qualified females for some of your details. And we've done a lot of work for the United States, different government agencies that have come here. And normally what I do is I head up what's called the Livuim, or the trying to think the English word for it, but essentially the ones who are doing the detail. I'm in charge of those security guards, right? I'm in charge of making sure that the team lead, I think that's what you call it in English, the team lead, right? So I'm the one that communicates with the client, my English. I know a lot of the nuances, the different, which state you're from. So I'm able to better understand your needs depending on which state you're from, what's your culture, what's your background. I try to basically kind of figure out my client and then essentially give them the maximum service. And essentially that's what I do. I'm the customer relations, so to speak, in a way, or international relations director of my company.
So before we get into
title, but it's simple.
Yeah. But before we get into how you got into that, something I wrote down. So I obviously in preparation for talking to you, I scoured all social and websites and everything. How did you, because I see you davening, I see you praying, and
yes.
You're praying as a Jew.
Yes.
Did you convert to Judaism? Did you go through
Yes.
that process? Okay, what was the rationale?
That's a great question. Okay, so I have to go back to where I kind of left off with giving you the quick background of my family background. So I ended up essentially in foster care through friends of my family or my parents. They knew of a basically what's known as a ministry, right? The Christian ministries. So a Christian ministry up in Haifa that had a drug and alcohol rehab. And they obviously knew that my dad would not, come and ask for help. But they basically approached this ministry and said, would you take in 2 children, one 13 and one 11? So I was 13, my younger brother was 11. And they were like, what? This is drug and alcohol rehab. It's not a place for kids. And so where did they come from? Back in the 90s, a couple got married or met in New York City, both of them in the performing arts. David Davis was the head of the performing arts professor of Fordham University. He had, everybody needs to basically be grateful for him because he's the one that's given us one of the best actors in the 21st century, which is Denzel Washington. He's the one that basically said, listen, you got some serious talent, and let me help you make that into reality, to put it in very short, sentence. And so, which is very funny, by the way, because years later, Denzel Washington made a very quick trip to Israel for, I think, like 3 days, maybe in 2008, give or take. And if you can find any of that online, it's kind of funny to watch the headlines. It's like, what are you doing in Israel? Denzel Washington, this is like amazing. Like, what are you doing? So all of the people, the talk shows, I don't know if you've ever heard of Guy Penis. He likes to, yeah.
No, we don't know Guy Penis. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry for the American audience and your ears, but it's a legit name. Guy is a Hebrew name for actually a guy is a, anyhow, I'm not going to start translating, but you can Google it. And penis is not, and so he calls David Davis to try to get a scoop, because he says the only thing he said was he's coming to see Israel, the Holy Land, because he's a Christian, and to see all the holy sites in Jerusalem, and he's coming to see his good friend David Davis. And they're like, who the hell is David Davis, right? And so Guy Penis calls this former Marine. By the way, that's his background before he became got into the performing arts and acting and all that. Hi, this is Guy Penis, and I want to ask you about the da-da-da. And he's like, he thinks it's like a prank, right? Because he's this old school, and he's like, who? And I was like, oh gosh, this is horrible. And basically he tells him, listen, he's like, I'm not a story. Your story is Denzel Washington. You want the story, go talk to him. I'm nobody. Today I've left the performing arts, and I have a drug and alcohol rehab that we've been running, and he's been pastoring what's called a messianic community, or kehillah, right, in northern Israel. And so that's what he's been doing ever since he left showbiz. And there's a picture of him like in his office, for example, with Anthony Hopkins, right? So that's kind of what I grew up with from year 13 and up, is this super straight-laced, very manly man, would hit the gym every day. I mean, he was, for his age, he was built like a good Marine. And pictures of like people like, these famous actors. And I'm like, okay, all right, interesting. Because I grew up again in Kiryat Shmona, a bunch of Moroccans, Sephardics, what have you, Iraqi, and so on. And I was the only white kid that got his butt kicked all the time. And so from that to, kind of yuppie, high class, professor. And then his wife is also, I forget what her specialty was, but she also was into, studious and tons of books and philosophy. And I'm just like drowning in what in the world, I grew up on the streets, okay, because of my family background and what happened. And so literally from the age of 8 and onwards, I mean, I've been, taking care of my brother, having to cook for him because my mom was checked out. That's how I grew up. And then I go from this to this straight-laced, group of people. And
we got the best of both worlds at that point.
Basically, yeah. So that's why if don't sound like a total street thug, thanks to the Davises. They basically helped give me some culture and my English, thanks to them, because I used to say, for example, he would always get on my tail and say, udders is what's on a cow. You mean the other people? And I'm like, right. So that's where I ended up. Yeah.
So you go into mandatory service at 18 in Israel, right?
Yes. And so I meet my wife at this congregation, and then we get married. I go to Bible school in Pensacola, Florida. Okay. To study theology, because I'm the pastor's son here in Israel, who comes from, their pedigree is from Times Square Church, David Wilkerson, and their drug and alcohol rehab comes from the same, template as Teen Challenge, if anybody's heard of that. Just read, I got one of these books here. One of my favorite books on SEALs, and I feel like there's a lot of, connection there, is this right here, Fearless. Okay. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
So he's been through Teen Challenge, for example, and I'm like, yes, brother. Because they do a great job in the United States helping guys get off drugs and alcohol, and him being one of those success stories, if you will, who ends up essentially becoming a SEAL Team 6 operator. So Tier 1 operator who struggles with drugs and all that. So very cool story, very inspiring. Please, if you're interested, Adam Brown, Fearless. It's a great book. Any case, back to Times Square Church and all that. They come to Israel in the 90s. The wife is Jewish background, right? David Davis grew up, I think, Catholic. And so they're going on an Israel trip because of her connection as a Jew. And they come to Jerusalem and they're having a great time, holy city. Oh, great. Just like the Bible, like naive Christians would, right? And all of a sudden they run into the drug and alcohol problem, especially in the Arab community. And they're like, wait, there's drugs in the holy city, in the holy land, right? That, what I'm saying? That naivety. I'm not saying Christians are naive, but you get what I mean? They read the Bible and they have a perspective from what they read. And depending if you come from Europe or China or North America or South America, everybody has a different picture of what they, think the land of Israel is all about. So they get that experience, they get shocked, they go back to Times Square Church and they tell David Wilkerson, hey, this is shocking. We can't believe this is an issue. We want to help fight this problem in Israel. So they move to Haifa, and then the Gulf War breaks out. So they spend the whole first of their year, right, with the Gulf War, and they get that behind them, and then they start the drug and alcohol rehab. And then with time, people are like, hey, you guys are obviously studious and you know Bible and whatever. Can you be our pastor? And he's like, me? like, okay. And so he's like, fine. And out of that basically was birthed a Messianic community, Keilah. And his wife ends up becoming one of the most well-known worship singers, or Hebrew Israeli worship singers internationally. So anywhere I travel now and talk about Israel, they play her music because they're like, hey, we want to make you feel at home, Doron. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's my foster mom, Karen Davis. So any case, so that's my background. And then fast forward to 2003. My original recruitment is 1999. I requested to get a year break for going to the United States and take care of my father, who was in an old folks home with special needs because of his addiction to alcohol. So they gave him, drugs and so on to kind of keep him from being cranky, to put it plainly. And my mom had just passed away just before I got married, just a few months before. So I made a request to the military. They're like, nope. And I was like, okay, not Jewish, don't owe you nothing. I don't even have citizenship yet. I'm still on the status of Toshav Keva is what it's called. And so I get a lawyer and he gets me out. He's like, done. So I get out, like I said, go to Bible school, and then the 9/11 happens. And this is leading up to it was the Intifada here in Israel. So terrorist attack after terrorist attack. And I'm over there eating my heart out, a natural born warrior. And I'm just like, this is killing me. I want to get back home. Forget Bible school, forget all this theology stuff. I want to go back home and I'm going to fight. I am done. Sit on the sidelines, watching my people get chopped up to bits by a bunch of murderers. So 9/11 happens, and then I'm going, check. So like a lot of Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Marines and all these dudes in the States, right, who started their military service because of 9/11, well, mine led me to starting my service in Israel. I didn't choose the American route. I went all Israeli patriot and wanted to go to my home where I grew up and fight for my homeland. And so came back to Israel. I finished my studies early. I was 4 months out. It was my last semester. I talked to the professor, who is a very well-known, internationally known Bible scholar, Dr. Michael Brown. He's kind of huge in the evangelical world. And so I said, listen, Dr. Brown, I said, I'm sorry, but I got to go back home, and I just wanted to get your blessing because, I feel kind of bad. We just paid for the last semester. We're about to start. And I really need to go to Israel. He says, I totally understand, all blessings on you, brother. See ya. Come to Israel. Takes about a year to reprocess me back into the military because they're like, oh, your record's gone. So I have to start over. And I get recruited in 2003. I was shooting for Special Forces. I got trained by an officer from one of our special units. I'm not going to name it where. And the unit I wanted to get into was actually the Israeli Navy SEALs. That was my number one pick. My number two pick was where this officer served. And he saw me one day just running the track there, where I lived. And he's like, hey, man, what you doing? And he's about my age. And he goes, what you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just trying to, get in shape and whatever, because I'm a bit in Bible school, doing a lot of, ramen noodle, living on a shoestring budget, trying to, pay for my tuition and, work on the side, that kind of deal. So I was not in shape at this point. Although my whole upbringing, I was an athlete. I did basketball, played for the Haifa Hapoel League. I did tennis, I did volleyball, I was on everything, track and field, you name it, I did it. And so at this point, I'm like really not in shape because of 2 years in the States. And so I'm trying to get into shape. And this guy's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying to get, shape because I want to be, I'm getting recruited here soon. And he goes, okay, where you want to go? I tell him the name of the unit and he goes, oh. And he goes, I actually served in that unit as an officer, my second pick, because I figured maybe I'll get into that unit, being so old and whatever. And he goes, well, you see these kids here? And I go, yeah, what the heck are they doing? You see them crawling in the mud and then the stickers and all this. And I'm like, what in the world are these kids doing? He goes, this is how you prepare. I go, huh? He goes, you want to join? I said, heck yeah, I'm in. So thanks to my buddy, I'll call him Y. He beats the living tar out of us. I mean, this is up on the Golan Heights where I was living at the time. Again, I'm not going to give the exact location, but somewhere on the Golan Heights with basalt stones, big, is you guys call it basalt?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So these big basalt stones, he made us crawl on those, crawl on them, crawl into the weeds off to the side. And then the dead of winter, he made us crawl into one of the creeks. It was freezing. He's like, all right, crawl down in there, go into the river or the creek and come out, when I tell you where. I mean, stuff like that, just nonsense, just beating the tar out of us, kicking us, punching us, the whole thing. And basically made us tough as nails. And then I get the bad news. All right, Doron, you're not Jewish and you're married. So you're not going to get to try out for the special forces. And I'm like, gutted. I'm like, you got to be kidding. So I talk to Y and I say, hey man, what am I going to do? Like, listen, my brother's the only one that served in the military, my younger brother, and he's already done his pipeline and he ended up in the special forces of, there were special, it's like you have the special forces, but then you have the recon units. So he ended up in the, not recon, but it's another special sapper unit of the Nachal battalion. And he doesn't give me any information. He's a total, knucklehead, right? He's like, it's all in your head. I'm like, yeah, everybody's telling me that it's all in your head, but can you give me some coaching? Like, what do I need to do? Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, what do I do? And so, I'm talking to Y. He's my only point of contact as to what to expect. What's the pipeline like? How do we do what we do, right? And so he's coaching me. He goes, listen, you're not going to get in unless you convert or divorce your wife. And I said, that ain't happening. And he goes, okay. So your other options are paratroopers, if you want to wear the sexy beret and look cool, and be like, hey, I'm a paratrooper. Or, sorry for anybody in that, I've been getting some kind of hateful comments, and my wife has been telling me, I don't even read them, but she says people think you're like an airsoft wannabe. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, this is a real gun behind me and that's a real body armor. And I've been, on the real front lines, but okay. Think whatever you want to think. And if people get offended about what I say about the military, it's totally my opinion. And it just so happens to be that I serve with people from those communities and they don't seem to be offended by what I have to say about them. So any case, that aside, for any of the hateful comments, that's for you. Type away, keyboard warrior. So I'm like, bro, I don't need any show whatever. I said, I want to go where the action is. And he goes, okay, because I'm a moron like that. And he goes, then you have Givati. And I said, really? And he says, yeah. And he says, the head of Givati, the one who's going to take over the battalion, he's actually one of my former commanders, officers. And I go, awesome. Total respect if I get to serve under that guy. Obviously, I'm going to serve under him. I'm going to be a cadet, and he's not going to know me. I'm just a peon. And but just the idea that one of the officers who trained this guy, who's a total hardcore dude, who made me into the formidable, warrior that I've become today, and gave me those foundational, the foundations of badassery, if you want. And I say, you know what? I'll do that. And it's called Givati. So Givati is the Purple Berets. They were the Ghazi unit up until the pullout in 2005. So I joined Givati. I try out for the recon unit. And I made the biggest blunder of my life. So I'm probably fitter than most of the guys there trying out. I'm at the head of the head of the pack in every grouping I end up in, because the way they kind of work, without giving out too many details, is essentially they kind of mix you up. You're just a number. They put a number on you, and they'll be like, number 12, number 80, number da-da-da, come here. And then they make like a little small grouping, and then they just beat the living crap out of you, crawl, get to that line, and come back. You have, 50 seconds up to that hill and back. Fill this sack, one of those, sacks that you fill with sand, for like a fort. Fill those up. And go up to the head of that hill and then be back here and count how many you've done. Stupid stuff like that. Again, without giving too many details. And so I end up basically head of the pack the whole time. And I keep getting, detached to other guys, they mix us up. So nobody's friends. Nobody, there's a method to the madness. And then I get to one of the groupings after this, I think it was on the second day. And what happens is I'm like a robot, So the American in me is the whole like follow orders to a T, yeah. Unlike the Israeli, which is like, how do we break the rules? Like that's the rule, but how do I break the rule? What's the exception to the rule? And so I'm like Mr. Robot, and that was actually my nickname from the guys in my platoon later, like Doron the Robot. Hilarious, right? Because I literally would do anything they tell me to do. And so they're like, okay, I want everybody in the push-up position, and they put you in the hold, right, where you're up. And then like when we say down, down. When we say up, up. So they go down, down. And people go, doing the whole like, whiny and, the wiggle thing and whatever. And I'm like a ruler. I'm just, I'm like, I've been here before. I've made hundreds of push-ups by now, hundreds of sit-ups, everything. Like I've had the living tar beat out of me. This is nothing. So I'm just holding. But the problem is nobody else is doing it like me, right? They're like laying down or back up and they're screaming at them and tell everybody, we're not going to go to up. So I'm just holding it and holding it and holding it. And then finally they go, up. And I go up and then down and down. And then what ends up happening is I get massive cramps in my legs, right? Because I'm holding myself in this stiff position while a bunch of turds are not, they're not following suit. And of course, at this point, because I'm like, hey, I've been trained for this. There's no way I'm going to lay on the ground. Like I've been trained to like do anything, but it becomes my Achilles heel. And here's why. Eventually, after that rotation, they're like, okay, now we're going to go da-da-da. And I can tell that I can barely walk because my legs are cramped to bits. Now I'm at the back of the line, right? So here I go from the head of the pack. And because of this stupid injury now, I'm in the back of the line. And now I start to feel horrible. I start to get this guilt. I'm holding them back. I'm keeping them from being at, from fulfilling the maximum potential of the team. I'm the weakest chain of the link now. And so what do? We have this downtime to drink a little bit. And by the way, when I say drink a little bit, I mean a little bit, because at this point, you have never been thirstier in your whole life. This is all in the desert, okay? We're so stinking thirsty. And every time we ask to drink, they're like, no, you can't. And this is funnier in Hebrew, and the Hebrew audience will maybe laugh, maybe not. אפשר לשתות המפקד? לא, אפשר לשתוק. So it's kind of similar. It's like, can we drink, sir? No, you can shut up. And we're just like, oh God, like you're so parched. And that's what they do. They bring you to the very limit. And then right when they know that, it's like, okay, you can have something to drink. And it's like, oh God, thank you, And so that's where we were at. And we're in one of those rotations of finally we can drink up, and we're drinking. And I go to the guys running the like the buds, or I don't know what you call it in English. And I said, hey, I have a problem. And they're like, okay, what is it? I said, I can barely move. My legs are totally cramped. I was like, unless you guys have some kind of special thing to advice, whatever. I said, I'm holding everyone back. And this was the naive guy in me, right? And I didn't realize I fell in the trap. The guy goes, oh yeah, that's right. You're the oldest guy here, aren't you? Like I'm like 22, 4 years older than everybody else. And I go, yeah, and he's like, yeah, you really put in, I think, yeah, you've done your bit, man. You really have, and, you should step this one out. Not realizing he's talking me off the ledge, right? Or off the ledge, meaning off as in, bye, sucker. And I'm like, later on, I'm sitting on the bus, and all of a sudden the coin drops. I'm like, you idiot. Oh no, right? And of course, I can't get off. I can't run back. It's done. Like, you just sealed your fate. And that was my only time that I failed, so to speak, in the military process. Ever since then, I was like, never again. Never again. Like, you're going to have to shoot me. I ain't going down. And so, of course, the guy that trained me, I told him what happened. He's like, you idiot. I was like, you planned me for everything, but not the psychological game. I didn't know that they were playing dirty. I thought they were telling me the truth. I was like, dude, I'm such a naive moron, you know? And he goes, yes, you are. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm so sorry. And so long story short, I do get an interview. I explain my background, why I'm here, whatever. And of course I don't get selected because basically I suck, and ended up in one of the battalions, right? One of the normal combat battalions. And that's where I start my military career from that point onwards, which essentially, to give you an equivalent, it's the closest thing to the U.S. Navy, Marines. So we train with the Marines. We do amphibious landings like the Marines, and a lot of similarities with that. And that's the pipeline where I start. And then in 2004, I get offered to go to what's called the Kurs Nativ, the Nativ course, which is a Jewish conversion process for kids that are, the mom's not Jewish, but the dad is, or, whatever the nuance is. And then fell in love with Judaism. And I was like, wow, this is not what they taught me in Bible school. Like, they taught me a lot of misinformation, just like there is in Judaism, by the way, about Christians. It's because of the religious wars of, nearly 2,000 years, each one has these misinformation of each other, and each one kind of, no, you guys this, and oh, you guys this, and you really don't really understand each other, just to tell you from both sides of the aisle. And so when I learned about, really what Judaism is from the halachic, instructors that we had, who knew halakha, who were either Orthodox and or conservative and or Reform. We had like the whole gamut. I didn't like any of the other guys. I liked the Orthodox ones. I was like, no, Orthodoxy. Like, what is, like, that's the vein I want to follow. And the rest is history. My wife also came out of a Christian background. Her father is a well-known Bible teacher till today, by the way, who teaches on Israel, who teaches about Jerusalem. He's one of the world experts, actually, from the evangelical world. And he also, he's amazing. And so both him and his wife and the rest of the family were totally respective of our decision to go through the Jewish conversion process. They actually have a kosher kitchen today, so that my kids and my family can, have food fellowship, if you will, with them, and so on. So they have completely accommodated us, and that's what it's been throughout the many years now, ever since then. And the birth of what you know as Doron Keidar, as who I was before, that's going to remain anonymous because of many different reasons. But anybody who really wants to deep dive, good luck. And, ooh, you must have a lot of time on your hands then.
So we covered a lot of ground there. That's for sure.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's really jump forward. You've got your background in the military.
Yeah.
You're working private security, executive protection.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of weeks ago, the worst attack since the Holocaust on Jews occurs.
Yes, sir.
And, to this day, my psyche is just destroyed. I walk around with like a pain in my heart, not just seeing all the anti-Semitism that's going on, but just what occurred is it's beyond the pale. Never in a million years could I think an attack like that could ever happen. You think of suicide bombings, you think of, a stabbing in Jerusalem, okay. But something just so vile, so disgusting, so inhumane occurs on October 7th. Yes. What was it like waking up that day? I know from listening to Jack's interview with you, Jack Carr, great show, great person. You were getting the text and everything from your unit, but just describe in just a communal sense, how are people feeling after seeing and hearing what happened?
So, trying to be strong for this. Like you said, it's the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. I've actually made the claim that it's worse than the Yom Kippur War. But you're right. It's probably, in my opinion, it's exactly that. You put it on the nail right on the head. It is worse than the Holocaust, downright. The Nazis didn't do that to our people. What these animals did to our civilians, to our mothers, to our children, to our babies, to our daughters, to our fathers, to our grandparents, is the most brutal genocide that, if I were to tell you in words what I've seen, you're not going to understand. Your mind can barely make sense of the fact that this is actually happening. What you're witnessing, what you're seeing, it's not warfare. It's downright cruelty, inhumane, and it's, like I said, it's animalistic. What these animals did, they're not human. They don't deserve the title of human. Any person who does this kind of acts to another human being does not deserve the title of human. You're like a demon in my book. Because only demons are going to unleash such hate, such cruelty to their fellow man. When I operate with my men, and I've operated for many years, like you heard, I've served the military since 2003. I went to commander course. I ended up being one of the founders of the search and rescue units, if anybody knows, with the yellow helmets and all that. So I was the first platoon of the enlisted soldiers of that, the Palchatzim, and ended up then being detached to the Northern Battalion and serving my first reserve duty in the Second Lebanon War, actually in the post of the Second Lebanon War, because there was a bunch of chaos and mess. And instead of calling up our guys, they sent a bunch of kids who had barely finished basic training. Again, I'm not going to get into the failures that we made. Anybody can look it up. But I can tell you firsthand, because I was there, it was heart-wrenching to watch these young kids come home shell-shocked from the horrors of what happened with Hezbollah, and just sitting at home, not being able to do a thing about it. Again, I didn't sit at home. I put on my uniform. I was, again, green when it came to anything to do with reserve duty. I had no clue how it even works. I just knew I had a piece of paper that said, "Here's your base." I went, "Great." Put on my uniform. I went to that base. I said, "I'm here." And they're like, "No, we can't bring it." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Again, I'm not going to talk about why and again, but essentially they just said, "Go home." I said, "Okay." So what I do, I handed out humanitarian aid, joined forces with a bunch of different groups of volunteers who were handing out food and different needs to the communities of the north, and me being that's my home territory, the northern of Israel, the Galilee, Upper Galilee. I was able to direct those needs to the most hurt areas. So between Second Lebanon War and every battle that we've been in ever since, I've been in all of them. Nothing compares. And I've also conversed with older generations who have fought in the Yom Kippur War, in the 6-Day War, and Milchemet Atashah, in the what's that called in English? The War of Attrition. Nothing like this has happened. Nothing doesn't come close. Okay, the closest is the Yom Kippur War, where I know a personal friend who served in one of our special reconnaissance units, and his whole unit got taken down. And then he found them in the most horribly mutilated ways from the Syrian soldiers. Again, I'm not going to give details. I don't want your poor audience to have to envision even what and how he found them. But listening to his stories doesn't come close. And again, it's not to minimize anyone's suffering and trauma, but it doesn't come close to what these animals unleashed on civilians, innocent babies.
Right.
The rage was inside of me.
It's
No words.
No, I mean,
words.
because if you're a soldier, you're taking up arms against another soldier, right? You know, I'm not saying it's a fair fight. It doesn't.
All fair and love and war. All
right.
fair and love and war.
But
yep,
you're purposely going to attack people who are unarmed. You're not a soldier. You are not a soldier. You're worse than a thug. You're just evil.
Yep.
And I've seen, up on Telegram with the day of, right? So I'm on Telegram. I'm being sent from my family in Israel. They're sending me stuff, and you're seeing the people trying to escape the dance festival being shot up. You've seen the people in the kibbutz.
And I was there in crowd zero, by the way.
Yeah. And
you don't want to know. You don't want to know.
So yeah, I mean, and I tell people you should go on Telegram, you should go on Twitter or X and see these videos so you can see how horrible other people can be towards another human being and understand why this is, why Israel is responding. But go ahead, continue. Because I'm sure you know people who are there.
Oh yeah.
How
we all do.
You're waking up in a kibbutz, and describe for what people don't understand what kibbutz is. It's not just a city. It's kind of like an agrarian commune. That's the best way I can describe it.
So let me defend my honor here. I don't live in a kibbutz. I live in a moshav. Yes, kibbutzes are cool. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not the kibbutz kind of person. So yes, we live in a moshav just outside Jerusalem in the Jerusalem hills, in the Judean hills, and I'll walk you through. I just wanted to get that off my chest for people to understand, to get a little bit of a context. So let's walk through what happened Saturday. So we had a wonderful Sabbath meal. I think we had some guests that night. We had some guests. Again, it's been a while. I just got home since that faithful morning for the first time now. And we had a wonderful time with our guests. We had a wonderful Sabbath meal, time of fellowship, and I'm exhausted. It was a long week with the Sukkot festivities and a bunch of Christian happenings and what do you call it? I was with Robert Stern's Pray for Jerusalem Day and a bunch of different things like that. And other was it the Jerusalem Christian Embassy or something like that? They also had something which I skipped out on because I was like, brothers, I would love to come, but I am exhausted. So I was exhausted from just the holidays, the workflow of things I had going on at the time. And I was like, I told my wife, I'm sorry. I normally do the men in our family normally do the dishes on Sabbath. And so I said, listen, I'll get the dishes in the morning. Great call, by the way. There's nothing like a war to get you out of dish duty. You gotta laugh a little bit with all the horrors that we're going through. So, any case, my wife wakes me up. I'm a pretty deep sleeper, and the funny thing is, it's weird sounds that will wake me up, but not loud sounds. The whole house is shaking. And my wife wakes me up, and she's like, honey, something's wrong. I said, what do you mean? She goes, this has been happening for a while. I said, really? And I'm still groggy and still trying to wake up. And I'm like, huh? And so I said, okay, let me check the group text. Normally,
wait,
I'm not going to touch.
Before you get there, was that Iron Dome launching?
Yeah, it was the Iron Dome. Yes,
okay.
But I didn't know what it was. It was. I'm trying to process what on earth is happening. Like, yeah, you're right. And so, again, through experience, I grew up in Kiryat Shmona. I know what the Katushas are like. We used to live at one point along the Gaza Strip area, so we know what that's like. And we moved back to Jerusalem, actually, because my daughter had some serious trauma. And she's actually having not such a good time right now because this is reviving those traumas that we tried to leave. Wetting your bed, all that kind of stuff. Real fun. So for those that think we're animals and Zionist pigs and all that stuff, yeah, okay, sure. So I take my phone and I'm just like, let me just see if there's something from the unit. If it's not from the unit, then I'm putting it down and we'll just figure out what it is. So I pick up, and you know how on your phone you have the, before you open the screen, you can see the preview. And sure enough, there's like my group unit text is like, I'm like, okay. I said, well, I got to open this. Open it because we have a missions text, and this is the missions group text, and I'm like, this is not good. I open it up, and it's like flooded with each one is saying this and that, the other. I'm like, what the hell is happening? And so I'm trying to catch up, right? And I'm dyslexic, by the way, so I have a hard time reading and processing that stuff. So I'm trying to make sense of it while being groggy. While I need now in my 42 years of age, now I need glasses to see close. So I'm all of this, I'm trying to figure out what the heck. And all of a sudden the siren goes off. I'm like, holy crap. So I run up to my kids, grab them, snatch them, and take them straight to our bomb shelter. And then I'm just like now my adrenaline's pumping and I'm like, what in the frick is happening, man? Right? Like now you're getting into gear, into combat mode. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm just like, wait, no, that's not happening. That is not happening. So I'm like, honey, I'm getting my gear together. And thankfully in my office here where you're seeing, I got all my stuff, and thankfully I have it that's about the only thing that's kind of tidy in my life right now. That's what happens when you juggle a lot of things. And sure enough, within minutes, I got a bag ready to go. And my commander's like, we don't have the green light yet to go. I look at my family. I said, I'm going. So I get in the car while the siren is blaring again for the umpteenth time that morning. And I start heading to our missions base, like where we collect, right? Doesn't matter where that is. So we meet up. And so while I'm heading down, he goes, green light, the whole unit. And I'm like, on it. I'm already heading that way. So on the way, I pick up one of my good friends and we go to base. Now we're all gathered together and we're like, what in the frick is happening, guys? I still don't really fully know because I've been driving like a madman and I'm not going to be messing with my text at the same time. And I'm like, dude, what is happening? And so I'm getting briefed by my buddy, right, who's the ride along. I'm like, dude, what the frick is happening? He says, it says that this is happening. It says it. I was like, okay, rumors, news, whatever it says. Let's see what happens. Like, let's see what's actually happening when we get to our missions base. Get to our missions base. The commander starts to brief us. And then my heart sinks. I go, what? It hits me like a ton of bricks. How many people did you just say got slaughtered? In what communities did you just say? I know people there that are first responders. I know people that live there. And I know some of those special forces units that were called up before us, well, about the same time, but instead of doing what we do, they went straight to engage with the enemy and to do hostage rescue, and I go, oh God, no. And as the day progresses and we're just standing there like, someone give us a freaking gun and let's go fight. Because I don't know if you noticed the gear behind me, I have that ready to go year round. My unit, we're a bunch of pipe hitters. We're a bunch of gearheads, shooting instructors, executive protection guys, former special forces. I'm talking about Navy SEALs to Sayeret Tzadchanim. We have no one from Sahim. Sayeret Golani. We have, you name it, every special unit that you can think of. That's what comprises my very small group of guys. And I'm, of course, one of the only ones who doesn't have that kind of background. What I have is a security background. What I have is a lot of other skills that I bring to the table. But I'm telling you, I'm with a bunch of guys who are legendary. Okay, and I'll send you one of the texts. I'll send you a text later of one of the books that depicts one of the units that one of my guys was. He was one of the founding operators of that unit. Long story short, my guys, you know, we're the dogs of war. Just let us loose. We've been training year round. Military doesn't have training. They don't have a write up for training. No problem. We'll do it. We'll do it privately. We'll go get paintball. And the only time I've ever airsoft is in training. I hate airsoft, by the way, because it's like it doesn't feel real at all. You know, it's like you shoot and it's like, what is this? Like, you know, thump, 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 thump. It's like you hear a sound and you feel no recoil.
Recoil.
I was like, I hate this. So in any case, because apparently somebody called me out as an airsoft wannabe operator. I'm like, oh really? Well, I'll airsoft your butt anytime. You know, I'd love to airsoft with a guy like you. Even though I don't do it, except for training, I bet you I'd have a little fun with y'all, because we do real tactics. And I imagine in the airsoft world, with a bunch of little, sorry, I'm not going to make fun of those people. Excuse me. Sorry. It's that alpha male operator, pipe hitter community that I've been hanging out with right now. Forgive me. Let me make it more civilian. Basically, we get things done. And logistically, it's taking too long for us in our book. We're like, get us our weapons. Right. We have all our little gizmos that we're going to trick out our guns with, and our gear's ready. Just give me bullets. I'll fill it in my mags and we're ready to go. Just let us loose. That is the mindset for that first 24 hours. And we're just sitting around getting more and more frustrated as the reports are coming in. Friends of ours from the field are telling us what's happening. We're just like, dude, let us loose. And of course, orders have to come in. There are generals that make decisions. We're not GI Joes. And so, yeah, the frustration is increasing. The irritation. Why ain't things getting done? And that's the first few hours of our existence. And of course, we had to leave. Many of us, like myself, leave our family and say goodbye as they're in a bomb shelter. And then I'm hearing reports of terrorists running rampant. And what's going through my head? My family is vulnerable. My wife's parents, they live with us. So I'm thinking, okay, he's got a military background from Sweden, but he's old. Okay. He's senior. He's not going to go running around John Swick and nothing. And he can't get armed because he's not an Israeli citizen. So that's out of the picture. My other family member, also, he doesn't have a military background, period. So my family's completely vulnerable. And what I hear in the reports is that they would come to bomb shelters where the families were huddled, and they would, police, open the door. We just want to help. Come on, please, let us help you. We got the bad guys. They open up the door, and whoever opened the door, they just mowed them down. Bloodbath. Whole families chopped down like that. So this is what's going through my mind. My family's vulnerable. If one of those scumbags comes in my house and does that, I'm like trying to like calm down myself and be like, God, keep me from even thinking the thought, because no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Mentally, that is a bad place. That's very dark thoughts. Bring it back. Pull it all back in. And we're all thinking that. We are all on edge, right? I mean, we're all like, our families are vulnerable.
So Doron, that's something that people in the United States take a breath to.
Yeah.
People in the United States don't have that feeling. What you just talked about.
Yeah.
Right. So when we go and fight wars, we're fighting wars off of our soil. We've never fought a war on our soil for a long time.
Only in Hollywood with Red Dawn.
With Red Dawn. Right.
Only in Hollywood.
Only in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other sense of urgency, because not only do you have to keep the mission, stay professional, do what you have to do, but you're thinking about, my God, who's watching my six and my family? When we're over
right.
in Afghanistan and in Iraq, you know, we've got law enforcement, National Guard here protecting the family, and it's really hard for people to come and invade America. But when you're a very small country, size of New Jersey, and you're surrounded by bad guys, your mind could be going in a million different directions on, my God, what if this is just the beginning of a full-on assault on the country? What are we going to do? I mean, that's got to be really tough to have. And at the same token, that gives you a lot more reason if you're fighting. If you're feeling the need to be motivated to fight, you're like, oh, I can't do. You're like, oh no, I got to do this. There's no question. I got to do this.
That's right. That's exactly it.
So I'm thinking at the same time, we're going to have probably a part 2 episode. You know, I'll catch up with you in a week or two because we're running short on time.
God willing, brother. Again, there's no guarantees
Baruch
right
Hashem.
now, as you know. But by the way, here's another thing, talking about law enforcement, like you just pointed out. Here's the thing. Okay, I can't talk about that. Here's the thing I need to rethink about. Here's the thing. The law enforcement here, okay, they fought bravely to defend the home front. And that's the other thing that's going through our minds. Holy smokes. Another unit, police unit went down. Another, Netivot, the whole police station went down. Like, dude, I knew people there. I used to live in the vicinity. I used to take educational tours and say, here's the reality in Gaza. Let me take you to that was a classy place that you take people because they would have a showcase of all of the makeshift rockets and Qassamim that they would shoot towards the communities. And that whole building leveled. I'm telling you, it's leveled. And you understand what I'm saying? Like, your mind can't even comprehend. I'm like, wait, they took down the whole compound? What? Right? And you're like, so now our law enforcement is non-existent. Like, these guys really did a freaking good job. And really, kudos to you guys. You did a good job. I will give you that. But you're animals. Okay? You're animals. You went after innocent people that are defenseless. And guess what? If my unit did that, we would be way more successful and get way more kills than these scumbags. But we're not animals. We don't do that. We go after the bad guys. And let me tell you, we're coming for those guys. We're coming for them. And yeah, you better hide in your bunker and lock the lid real tight because we're coming for you. And we're not a bunch of cowards like you all are. And that's a message to those scumbags if they're listening. Know that people like me who are talking about that. One of my unit members who left us, he's one of the fastest guns in the country. He trains like a freaking machine. I mean, he's a machine. I mean, if you ever see this dude shoot, smooth, and it's pop, 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 pop. I mean, and a terrorist broke into his house trying to look for an innocent civilian. The dude long story short, the dude got cut down. Another good friend who I know him from another outfit and background. He was part of the first responders. They took out over 20 dudes that were trying to come and take over their community that's right on the border. So yeah, you mess with the real dudes, with real warriors, you're going down. You guys aren't worth nothing in comparison to our ability. And again, I'm not trying to brag. I do respect my enemy. And like I said, they did a good job, but you did it to the wrong people. And you did it in a very cowardice way. And we're coming for you. And we're not coming for the Palestinians. We're not coming for innocent people. We're coming for the bad guys. And they're going to hit the dirt very hard if we have anything to do with it.
So, and I will bring you back to have a part 2 because I really want to break down people's response like you were talking about because there is the people don't understand outside of America and the Second Amendment how different countries, and people always thought, well, everyone in Israel has a gun, but it's not quite like that anymore.
Right.
But before we wrap up part 1, I want to talk about how people can help your organizations with donations, what do you? How can people donate to? And now we didn't even get into your nonprofit, but you have a nonprofit, Cry for Zion, that is directly supporting your unit. And that's another thing I want to get into. Like, I don't understand how all these units need so much stuff in a time of crisis. So quickly,
Right.
in a 5-minute wrap up, how can people help you, and why do they need to help you?
Okay. So this is a very sticky issue the military doesn't like to talk about, because essentially the military is well equipped. We have everything we need, weapons and all that good stuff. The thing is, there's a gap between those who operate yearly, right, or the enlisted soldier, and your reservist soldier. The reservist soldier gets called up once a year. In my case, I get called up multiple times a year for training. And my unit literally just trains year round for war. We don't take normal deployments like a lot of the combat units do, and so on. And so essentially what that means is that when wartime and crisis happens, like right now, all of the gear, the quality gear, gets allocated to the ones on the forefront, which is the people I serve with, okay? Now, the biggest concern for many of the soldiers right now that have been sending me, a lot of them have been sending me requests, for example, for body armor. Now, the body armor that the military provides is in existence. My unit got body armor because, again, we're a frontline unit, like all the other units in my detachment that are in the tip of the spear of the combat. But the thing is, if you're like us, professional, then you would much rather have, and I can't get into details of what kind of body armor we do use, but anybody who knows, our enemy knows. But again, I'm not allowed to divulge too much info. What I can tell you is what we do prefer is what is current. So what's current is plate carriers and the body armor that goes with those plate carriers, something that your Navy SEAL or your Green Beret or your pipe hitters in the United States would be wearing and be issued and be using in combat. That's what we prefer to use, because what it is essentially is much more streamlined. It's much more, it makes it easier for me, especially at my age, to not carry a bunch of crap on me, And so the combat vests that the military will issue, again, they're good for the young guys. They're good for someone who doesn't have back problems like some might have. and so we want to try to kit ourselves out with the lightest plates, but that are NIJ standard, of course. We're not getting anything from China. We have to, and that's part of the military standard as well, is that we have to get something that is to code, which means you have to buy things that cost a lot of money. So my unit isn't going to get that kind of a budget. I won't divulge what lacks we have, but I will give you the smallest example that is, again, because it's prevalent and everybody knows. I can't point out the other ones that are an issue, but there are certain needs that we have for operational superiority, I guess you could say, that would be a preferred option. And so what I do is I take all of those needs from the field because I'm there. I'm not gonna allocate body armor to somebody who's gonna sit on the sidelines or somebody who's gonna be in a supportive role who they're close to the action but they're not in the action. That makes sense. So with all due respect, brother, I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna equip you. If you want to go get donations from somewhere else, knock yourself out. So where I allocate our donations and our needs, and that we streamline them to the ones on the very forefront. Secondly, we streamline to the first responders who took out the terrorists, but they took out the terrorists with the minimal amount of ballistic gear. So if the military has a certain allocation of funds, then those guys get the bottom of the barrel of that. and they are issued weapons from the military, and they are the ones who are held responsible to basically holding the front lines if something like what happened, and successfully, where the first responders did their job, they chopped down the bad guys, and all is good. But again, imagine you doing that, and with your experience, and anyone who has military experience, imagine doing that without body armor, or imagine doing it with not even a bump helmet. Would you like to do that? Some of you guys are psychos, and you're going, yeah. Well, I have family, I have kids. I want to go home in one piece, and so do those dudes. They're not a bunch of morons. Sorry if you're one of those that are like, yeah. I'm not saying you're a moron, but you get what I'm saying. We care about life, and that's a very important Jewish foundational principle. Not just the life of fellow Jews, but the fellow man. Period. And that's why the IDF is the most moral military in the world. I know that to be a fact. And so that's what we try to do. We try to, again, get it to the ones who are going to use it in the most important places. And whoever wants to give towards our nonprofit, that's what we do. We get it to those needs.
And I will link it in the show notes. I'll link it on my site. I'll link it everywhere. I'm also going to link your Instagram so people can follow you on social media and see what you're doing. And like I said, we'll have you back for part 2 to break down a lot of the stuff, talk about the gun issue in Israel. But people are fascinated about the response and how to defend from attacks like that. As you know, because a lot of Americans woke up that morning thinking, what if this happened here? But we'll get into that. But I know you're busy. I'm busy. So
I need to get to my family. I haven't seen them yet.
I know. and we thank you for taking the time to reach out to the Firearms Nation here in America. And people listen from Australia. But thank you for giving some perspective on who you are, what you're doing, and God bless you and stay safe. Thank you very much, Doron.
Thank you.